Ultrarunner and mountaineer Colleen MacDonald is known for her unshakable grit and love of flying down technical descents. Specializing in 50-mile and 100-mile ultras, she spends as much time as possible in the mountains. In 2025, that focus took Colleen to Mount Kilimanjaro, where she set an FKT on a route she and her partner established. Off the trail, Colleen advocates for women and girls in the outdoors through the Cairn Project and believes wild places should be accessible to everyone. You're about to hear about Colleen's August 2025 fastest known time, or FKT, on Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. Colleen turned this adventure into a grassroots fundraiser through the Cairn Project, raising several $1,000s for wilderness scholarships for other women. Colleen shared many behind-the-scenes stories on her blog and on social media leading up to and just after the trip, and now you'll get the full adventure recap. This is See Her Outside, Stories from Women Who Adventure. I'm your host, Angie Lake. On August 16th, 2025, Colleen MacDonald and her partner, Brian Korgard, set the mixed-gender FKT on Kilimanjaro's northern circuit, a 62-mile route completed in 36 hours, 5 minutes, and 52 seconds. The real story started years earlier, when Colleen first dreamt up the project in her late 30s and spent 5 years figuring out how to make it happen. The project was a female-led expedition on a route that demanded both ultra-running fitness and high-altitude confidence, with Brian running as a male ally on a project Colleen drove from the start. After a 5-day recon of the full route and 2 days of rest, they set off at 9 p.m., pushed through post-summit altitude sickness at 15,000 feet on the descent, and crossed the Lemosho Gate, having covered a distance most people take 9 days to complete. For Colleen, the project connects to a bigger thread in her life, including her years in the Peace Corps in Azerbaijan, where she was confronted with the inequities women face both at home and abroad. You can hear about that in our first episode with Colleen from March 2025, which was called DNF's Post-Race Blues and Competition with Collaboration. And then, actually, after we recorded today's conversation, we had another episode with Colleen from January 2026, and that was called Athletes Are Advocates to Speak Out Against Fascism. It's where Colleen and I share some thoughts and tips to speak up and be more politically vocal, especially when it's scary. That one should be required listening for outdoor athletes who want a healthier, safer society, so please add that one to your queue next. Now, here's the Kilimanjaro fastest known time adventure recap with Colleen. I noted that on our first episode together, Colleen was hesitant to share deeper details about this project.
And at that time, I think really the hesitation was, it didn't have anything to do about the doubt or me not wanting to shoot my shot. There were so many logistics. Like at that time, I was still trying to figure out the outfitter and the timing in terms of weather, and we literally changed the time that we were going to go to Africa like 4 times. Yeah. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes then that had me feeling like, oh man, if I throw this out that I'm going to be going in like February and that doesn't happen, that's going to like put me in this like conflict. So there was so much going behind the scenes at that time that it was like, I didn't even know when to say, even state a date of when we were going to be able to do it. And we actually didn't even pin down the time that we were going to be in country in Africa until quite late in the spring, which definitely had me sweating a bit and had me awake at night with some anxiety. So a lot of the logistics and everything that came together for the project, while I'd been planning a lot for it, some of those things did come together last minute for me, as I'm a huge planner and very much want to have my shit sorted. And it was a good lesson for me to, some things I had to just let go of and be like, all right, this is going to happen and we're going to see, we're going to make it work no matter what those details are. If they aren't done when I want them, we're just going to have to go with the flow a little bit. So
why the heck were you trying to go for this FKT anyway? And there's 2 pieces of that why, because there's this massive goal that you succeeded on and had this whole amazing adventure. But then there's the other side of turning it into a fundraiser where you were raising scholarship funds for other girls and women to spend time in the wilderness too. So like, why both of those and why those at the same time?
It's about 5, maybe even 6 years ago, I was at a point in my life where I was feeling a little bit lost and disillusioned, maybe having what we call an existential crisis, not feeling very happy with where I was at in both my personal and my athletic career at that point. And I was trying to think of, I needed something that was going to fire me up and get me excited to show up. I needed an adventure. I needed something, right? And so this was like right before COVID hit, and I was sitting at my kitchen table in my house back in Columbia Heights where I used to live, and just thinking through like, what do I want to do? And thinking through what is the biggest, scariest thing that I can think of in my life right now? Because I know I need that. And I know that's something that is going to fire me up and get me like focused and excited to show up. And I started thinking about Kilimanjaro, which is very weird because that mountain had been something that I'd been obsessed with and thinking about for a while. And it had kind of come in and out of my conscience and my thinking for several years. The reason that Kilimanjaro, I think, has been stuck in my brain for so long is that when I was a kid, and I've talked and written about this, my mom read me a story about a family with some kids, and they had been stuck or stranded in the middle of a storm on the side of Kilimanjaro. And as a kid, you would think that that would scare you. For me, it had the opposite effect. I was like, oh, damn, that's cool. Like the idea that there was so much adventure and like something exciting and larger and like really, at the time I didn't even know where Kilimanjaro was. It was just like this big mountain in Africa. Like where the heck is that? When you're a kid, your sense of place and context like just doesn't stick. So that is something that really stuck with me as a kid. And if I think about it, that idea of wanting to have adventure and live a big, large life and kind of like break out of this mold was something that I had and exhibited even as a kid, because when I was growing up, my heroes were like Indiana Jones and cowboys and spies and soldiers. Now, the moral implications of that are aside. When you're a kid, you don't understand that. But like, I never wanted to, whenever I thought about the life I wanted to live when I was a kid, when I was dreaming, it was something that was adventure driven. It was something that was big and wild and scary. And that theme has stayed with me my entire life. So bringing it back to Kilimanjaro, 2020, when I'm sitting there at my kitchen table, I realized I had probably lost that thread somewhere, or lost it in a way that wasn't beneficial to me and wasn't authentic to who I was. Now, at the time, I was still ultra running. I've been living an adventurous life, but I needed something more. So I came up with this idea, did all the research on Kilimanjaro, started diving deep into the routes, the FKTs, what people had been doing, and it got me really excited. This idea that there was this mountain that everybody, a lot of people climb it, they think it's easy, but there's also this other side to it of doing these FKTs that they're really, really hard, right? Like it is a difficult mountain in spite of the fact that you don't need, technical mountain skills or like oxygen. It is a challenging mountain to climb. So at the time, that idea of setting an FKT in Kilimanjaro stuck with me. And it was like so scary at that time because I was living at sea level. I was feeling like as an athlete, I'd maybe kind of hit a plateau and wasn't really performing or having that passion or that fire that I wanted. So it was like, oh shit, like if I'm going to go for this thing is scary. Like this seems so far out there and it seemed so bonkers and so ridiculous enough that it seemed like something that I could do and something that really appealed to me. Because it was so scary. Like, it wasn't something that was like, oh, I mean, I'm sure maybe I could do that. It was like, oh shit, this is so big that is the thing that gets me fired up.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I actually struggle for myself to figure out like what is a goal that I actually want to devote so much of my life to. And last time we spoke on this podcast, we were talking about I had run 100 miles that year. And when I signed up, I still like mostly felt like I could do it. I wasn't scared enough to be like, oh man, I don't know. I really think I can't run 100 miles, And but then if I think about like a bigger mountain or a really long expedition, I also don't really know if that's something I really want to do. It's scary, but I don't know if it's like scary in the sense that you're saying where it's like, I am so drawn to it because it's so big and scary, I must do it. It's actually like, do I even want that? Like, how do you know that that's something you deeply want?
That is such a good question. And I think, I don't know if I know how to answer that. I do know that at the time, I think maybe we've all had points in our lives where we've known something at our gut level or our intuition level was either for us or not for us, or something was kind of calling us or not calling us. And at the risk of sounding like woo-woo and kind of bonkers, it felt right at that time saying, this is what I want to do. And it scares the shit out of me, but I know that's what I want. I don't know how to explain that any other way than in my gut. It was like, this is for you. Like, this is what you want to do. And there's not been very many times in my life when I've been able to have that clarity or that sort of knowledge or understanding. And it's not always easy to listen to that because it is scary. And you, as an athlete or as someone, and I'm sure you can relate to this, when you reach a certain point in your life, when you've taken risks and you've done adventures and you've pushed outside your comfort zone, you can listen to your gut and your intuition because it might scare you at that time, but you know that on the other side of that is going to be something really good. And so you kind of go for it.
Yeah. It like intuition is innate and built within you, but it's also a muscle that you can flex and get better at growing and listening to and moving. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I feel that for sure.
Yes. But to your point too, I think it's similarly is good to understand what isn't for you or what doesn't call for you. And I think we're probably going to talk about it too, is that not every adventure or getting outside of your comfort zone has to be a big mountain or has to be this thing that's like massive and scary. It can be something small or just, it can be something that other people might think is not scary, but is important to you. And I think there's the validity and, strength in all of those things. So
totally. Well, cool. We have a good picture then of why specifically Kili, but then why did you also turn it into a fundraiser with the Cairn Project?
Yeah. I mean, I think that kind of goes back to, and we've talked about this a little bit, I think my roots in the Peace Corps is, for a long time, I've really felt that I wanted my athletic pursuits and the things that I was doing to have meaning. I think that's been another common theme throughout my life. And so when I thought about doing this big project, thinking of doing it just for myself, yes, was appealing. But then also just doing it for myself also seemed to bring a little hollow because at that point, I'd been racing quite a bit. I'd been doing these races. And while they were fulfilling and awesome, they did seem very selfish. And I was like, okay, well, I won that. Great. Like, did that have a net positive impact on anybody? That's very questionable. And so when I thought about trying to make that meaningful, it was like, yes, I want to push myself in this goal. Yes, this is awesome. And it's really going to push me, but there's got to have more meaning in that for it to both be something I'm going to keep going for or focusing on for multiple years. But then it also, I wouldn't feel, it wouldn't be authentic to me as a human if I did that. It was just like, hey, I did this, guys, look at me. It wouldn't feel like there was meaning or any point to it at that point. So
yeah. And I know we had talked, I think you might have even mentioned this in your first episode, but I know we talked about your childhood heroes being mostly like men, like the cowboys and Indiana Jones. And so by you turning this into something bigger than just yourself, it's rewriting that narrative so that other little girls out there are going to be like, sure, I like Indiana Jones, but Colleen, what a badass.
Exactly. And part of it was too, is when I was looking at the FKTs for Kilimanjaro at the time, and I know that's changed back in 2020, there was mostly males that had set FKTs on Kilimanjaro. There was one, I think she was a Dutch woman who had set the FKT on one of the shortest routes. But at the time, there weren't any other women that had done any FKTs on Kilimanjaro. And it was like, well, obviously, here's a gap. Like, there are more women that need to do FKTs on Kilimanjaro. And since that time, there have been other women. But it was also, to your point, part of that of thinking, okay, like if 10, 15 years ago when I was starting out in university, there was not anybody living the life that I wanted to live at that time. I didn't have any role models. Most of the people that I had surrounded myself with just by default were going through the normal progression of, graduate from high school, go to college, get a degree, get married, or some variation therein. And there was nobody at that time that I really saw doing the things I wanted to do. And then if you fast forward to 2020, I still didn't. And it's probably because there was a lack of visibility. I know that there were women out there that were doing things that were amazing and pushing, but I had to really search for it. And I didn't really, at that time, know anybody from Minnesota, know anybody that was like, hey, I'm going to go do some rad shit on a big mountain and like see what I'm capable of.
I mean, when I was in college, I specifically remember I really desperately wanted to join the outdoors club. And this was like the
Right?
outdoors club where
Yes.
like they go up to their lodge in New Hampshire in the White Mountains and they do the camping and they do the skiing and all the things. And I truly it was so I did not see anyone who looked like me or had my experience level
Mhm.
or my curiosity, and it did give off this very, like, bro-y vibe, and so I ended up no shade on the sustainability club, and I served on the e-board of the sustainability club, but that was my, like, comfort zone of, like, "Okay, well, I
Mhm.
can't join the outdoors club, so I will join the sustainability club so that I'm still somewhat
Mhm.
interacting with the outdoors, but I don't have to somehow match this like super intense broy energy." And I'm like really sad for past me because I would have loved the adventures if I had taken part in both clubs. And I truly,
Mhm.
truly believe that if I had even seen one person who really seemed similar to me in that club, then I would have taken the jump and joined it. But
Absolutely.
yeah, it's hard to find that visibility, that representation of people who are like you. And I mean, you and I are both like pretty strong, fit white women, and there's so many other people in our trailblazer community who have it, who
Mhm.
have even more barriers than we do. It's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. And even at that time in 2020, it was like I I mean, there were a couple it was just so hard to find eh, that visibility, but then also not that I always need affirmation in my life, but at that time in 2020, um, nobody that I told about that project, and I told a very few select people, they were all just like incredibly puzzled,
Mm.
both male and female across genders. And it was like, that to me was thankfully not discouraging. It was more, okay, this is really what I want to do. If these people are quizzical about it and maybe kind of don't doubt me and don't think I can do it, then that's just affirmation for me that this does need to get done.
Mhm. Yeah, one other thing I'll say there is when I said that I was going to run the 100 miler. Again,
Hmm.
this was over a year ago now at this point, but I had so many people be like, "Well, what are you running from? Like, you clearly are
Oh
like,
my God.
yeah, you're clearly trying to like deal with something, make this a coping strategy, and that's why you're running so much." And that was actually one reason why when I turned that into an adventure fundraiser as well, it gave extra
Hmm.
meaning to that to be like, well, sure, I'm running for myself. I'm not running from anything. I'm running towards my future self, but also I'm raising scholarship money for girls and women to trail run, backpack, mountaineer as well. And that, not that that's the point, but it does give people a little bit more perspective of like, oh, wait,
Hmm.
it matters. It's good that they're doing this.
Right, right. I cannot tell you how many times people have asked me what I'm running from, and my answers have varied over the years. It kind of annoys me, but now I just have to laugh a little bit, and I'm like, it doesn't matter.
Do you want to start getting into the actual adventure? Or is there anything else you want to
Yeah.
cover? Cool.
No, I mean, I do want to make sure. Like, the cool thing about this was deciding to do this project with the Karen Project was really good for me. Um, though I knew at the I always wanted the project to have meaning, and I wanted there to be advocacy, and I wanted there to be representation of women. I think doing it with the Karen Project helped me to see how that could happen, because it's one thing to have this idea in your head and know that you want to go that direction, but then actually being able to take tangible steps for that and having a little bit of a roadmap or a way to do that was really important for me, because it sent all these light bulbs off in my head of thinking about ways that I could advocate for women and girls in the outdoors, and that action and adventure could be used for that. And while I'd always had that in my head of something I wanted to do, actually doing that and taking those steps, making it very tangible was really powerful for me, because it brought the idea into reality.
Mm. I'm really glad you say that because we should probably be sharing that in our messaging more. So many people, so many women want to find a
Mhm.
way to volunteer, to have advocacy projects in their lives, and just those logistics and just the structure, not having that can stop you from doing that. So yeah, I
Mhm.
would agree. That's one of the best. That is kind of the point of
Mhm.
the Karen Project as a program is we are giving you the means to even set up a fundraiser. Like you don't have to create your own fundraising platform because we'll give it to you. And then also there's the accountability aspect. Like I'm always in your inbox, like, hey, Colleen, want to
Mhm.
write another blog post?
Which I like, and for me, I really needed that, because, and I think we might talk about this more as we chat through the adventure, but um, and we've talked throughout the Karen Project and our interactions and between the last podcast and now about, using your voice and standing in your power and being strong. And I hadn't realized until I had started working with the Karen Project, in that act of tangibly taking those steps, realizing that there were ways that I had been silencing myself, censoring myself, maybe not stepping up or fully showing up as who I am or who I want to be, which might sound surprising because I think I am a very strong person, and I have I've lived a life that has been very bold and adventure driven by many standards. But being able to dive into the work of advocacy or talking about a particular subject or addressing a very real challenge or barrier to women and girls getting in the outdoors showed me areas that I hadn't been being as bold, or encouraged me to be stronger with my voice and more forward and more forceful, and shed some layers that I maybe had keeping me from being as bold or as strong or as visible as maybe I wanted to be, or I should have been, or I needed to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been my favorite topic of 2025 in all parts of my life, is this idea of self-censorship and keeping ourselves quiet, or like canceling ourselves even. Like I've seen that in so many women. And I just love that. Like if you sign up to create an adventure fundraiser, it gives you a reason to be screaming about your thoughts, your perspectives, your physical feats. And it doesn't have to be an FKT on Kilimanjaro. It could be a 5K race, but it gives you a reason to share your own stories and perspectives around running and running a 5K and training. And what is the impact of me finishing this race on other people? Like use this as an excuse to start sharing your story, because those are muscles we all need to be flexing right now.
And I mean, I've really appreciated that content that you've put out, because I probably started out 2025 thinking like, oh, I got this. Like, I know how to talk. I know how to use my voice. Like I've used it before, but really digging into that and being like, no, there were ways where I was censoring myself, or there were ways where I was like, oh, I'm probably not going to say that because I don't want to ruffle feathers, or, maybe I don't have enough credibility. Like just kind of that stupid, those limiting beliefs or limiting voices that you have is like, yeah, those are still kind of present in my head. Like I need to get those out of the way because that's not helping anybody.
Yeah. And I think they'll always be sticking around in our heads, and it's just a matter of like being in conversation with them of like, okay, but I'm going to do this anyway. I'm going to take this measure.
Right.
Cool.
No, I appreciate that. But yeah, we can dive into the adventure. There's a lot of logistics and things that went into this. And it all kind of came together. We landed on a date of going to Africa in August, and we had a couple of, not limiting factors, but parameters for this trip and kind of the approach to the FKT that I think is important to talk about. We had a 3-week, 2.5, almost 3-week time period just due to work schedules and that sort. So we had 3 weeks. And so we knew that in the 3 weeks, we needed to not only understand and map the route that we were going to do, we also needed to be able to give ourselves time to set the FKT. And then we also had to have rest, and we needed to make sure we acclimated. And all those things, that's a lot to accomplish in 2.5, basically 3 weeks. So we had a tight time frame, which meant that when we worked within those parameters, the very structure of the adventure itself had to be pretty well laid out. And I don't use the word regimented, but we almost had to have it very scheduled. And we, quite frankly, didn't give ourselves any margin of error. So I would not suggest anyone else approach an FKT or a large project that way. We had to. Also, I think because we didn't have a margin of error, it did make us be very clear and very focused and very efficient with what we did have to do when we were in the ground.
Like that gave you a goal time, right? Like you were like, okay, in order to get this record, I need to, this is my one shot. Okay.
Or like even I have to be able to catch my flight back to the States. It was that close. So yeah, it was like, if we don't finish this, we are not making our flight back to the United States, or we're just going to have to, stuff's going to happen. Like we have to finish in this time.
Yeah.
So
cool.
So the way that we structured the project is we had a 5-day recon of the route. And what that allowed us to do was to both map the route on our GPS devices and also drop gear and food at certain checkpoints on the route. For anyone that doesn't know, we had first thought that this route was going to be 53 miles. On the recon, we realized it was going to be 62 and a half, which is no big deal, 10 extra miles. The thing is that nobody had done this route in the combination in the way that we had done it before. So that was part of the mystery and sort of the challenge of it, is that this was establishing a new route by piecing together a couple different routes on Kilimanjaro. And then that was where the unknown was, okay, we think it's 53 miles, but because no one's done it this way before, we're going to have to map this and then see.
Mm-hmm. And why did you choose to piece together a new route?
I wanted the challenge of it, and nobody had done it before. And I liked the idea of doing a longer FKT. I didn't want to just do the shortest route to the summit that a lot of other athletes have done. And I think that's awesome. There's nothing taking away from that accomplishment. But for me as an ultra runner, I'm like, I don't want to do a 15-mile route. I want to do something that's more in that ultra range that then starts adding in other elements and challenges to that route beyond just getting to the summit. It means that you're having to think about weather, food, nutrition, gear, emergency rest points. Like, there's so many more logistics, and it becomes more complicated, and in that aspect, more fun and more challenging for me.
Mm-hmm. And then on Kili, do you need to hire outfitters for a climb? And what was the process like of finding one who is willing to support you in an attempt like that?
Yeah, you do. So part of the rules of Kilimanjaro is you have to have a guide and someone with you when you're on the mountain. And so what we ended up doing was working with an outfitter that I'd worked with back in 2023. And they had worked with athletes before and had worked with kind of special projects around Kilimanjaro before. And one of the cool things is this outfitter, the founder of the outfitter, had been one of the first climbers or hikers to kind of map and sort of establish the northern route, which was the route that we were going to be taking. So it was really cool to kind of bring that back full circle and work with the outfitter that had been on the mountain for, 40, maybe 50 years at this point. So we ended up working with that outfitter, and it was really cool because in that recon, we worked with porters and then 2 specific guides. And as we started the recon and started to map the route, it was good to have the guides there with their knowledge of where we could filter water, where we needed to have like checkpoints and drop tents and porters and food, and have their knowledge too, in terms of understanding the weather patterns that were coming in, and when some of, thinking about, okay, this is when we want to start that climb from School Hut to the summit. This is what we need to think about if we're trying to descend. This is, what you want to have in mind when you're going to be heading back down an ascent route. These are the high traffic times. So being able to do the route with the 2 guides was really important because it was knowledge and information that we could then take back and help us decide how we wanted to structure the FKT attempt in the most efficient and effective way possible.
Mm-hmm. And you had a female guide as a part of the group?
Yes.
That's awesome.
And this was so awesome. So we had a female guide named Farida with us, and that made the recon and the FKT so much more fun and added a depth and like a context to everything that really was incredible. So with a little bit of context, the last time that I was on Kilimanjaro, I was the only female in our group climbing. And in the course of the 9 days that we were on the mountain, A, I didn't see that many other female hikers, and B, I saw one female porter, but I didn't see any other female guides. Wow. And this was back in 2023. This year, not only was I able to work with one of the best female guides in Kilimanjaro, but in the course of our 5-day recon, we ran into multiple other female porters and actually ran into one group of women climbing that had women guides, women porters, and an all female hiking group. Wow. Still, the numbers are low, but that was incredible to me and really encouraging too, to just see that there was a more diverse presence on the mountain than it simply just being men.
Did Farida have any reason why there were more women, or I mean, even in her experience, I know you can't necessarily share her whole story, but why was she there? Was it easier to become a guide, with the way that the systems are set up these days?
It is not easy to become a guide or a porter with the way the systems are set up. The pipeline to becoming a guide is that you have to be a porter first. And that is that is a job that is incredibly difficult, not only physically, mentally, but then also for the gender aspect of it. Many of the males don't want females being porters because they're worried that that's going to take away from their job. And it's been a traditional male job on the mountain, and they don't want the females taking that job away from them. Mm-hmm. And so she was telling me that it is incredibly difficult to become a guide because of that pipeline, and that she has to work 3 or 4 times as hard as any of the males, not only to earn respect, but then also from the clients that are coming in, earn respect from their side, because they're so used to seeing male. There's an assumption that the guides on the Kilimanjaro or the porters are going to be male, not female. So then having to work extra hard to overcome those biases when clients come in and are like, well, why is there a female guide? Mm-hmm. Like, why is there a female porter here? So hearing those stories from her were very revealing and really added some context. There have been initiatives and work that's going on the ground, specifically with some of the tour agencies that have started to say, okay, we can have female guides. Like, that's okay. Mm-hmm. We can start to support them and promote them and, give them the learning and the support that they need to be able to do this. And so I think those were some of those smaller actions that have been taking place on the ground is the reason why there have been more female guides and more female groups on Kilimanjaro. I still think that number is still very, very low. Yeah. But I think that there is some change being made.
That's awesome. And yeah, maybe you'll get there again in a few years and women teams all over the place. Yeah.
Yes. But no, and I think, and I'm really glad, working with Outfitter, it was really good to be able to have Farida there because it changed the atmosphere and the tone of the recon and made me feel more comfortable. And it added an element of camaraderie that hadn't been there in my previous climb that I'd had. And I really appreciated that. Make no mistake, Farida is a badass, can outrun probably all of the male porters as well. So
that's awesome.
So the recon went really well. Again, we had to drop gear and food we'd originally thought we were going to drop gear and food at two checkpoints at Pofu and Barranco. We ended up adding a 3rd checkpoint at School Hut, which was sort of our base camp before we summited. That ended up being a really smart decision because it allowed us for the FKT to travel a little bit lighter and kind of have that checkpoint right before we summited where, depending on the weather, we could add more layers, remove more layers, get some food and fuel up before the hardest part of the push. Mm-hmm. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So then how do you know when it's like time to go and like do the attempt? Is it just like, okay, we've done all the logistics and the weather looks good, I guess now's the time?
Sort of. And that was the big question, right? So we finished the recon and then we had 2 days back at the trailhead, and this was kind of where we didn't have a lot of wiggle room. We knew that we could only have 2 days at the trailhead because we didn't have that many days left in Africa. And we wanted to give ourselves a buffer of, how much time we thought the FKT would take us. And then the other element to that was trying to decide when to leave for the FKT, knowing what we did at that point about the weather, the traffic, the storms that can move in, and how we wanted to manage our gear. So we got back to the trailhead. We had 2 full nights of rest. We spent those, day and a half, 2 days planning and thinking through, okay, when do we want to leave? When makes sense, and had to make some reasonable guesses, some very educated guesses, I guess, about when it made sense to leave based on when we would like to hit certain points of the route and then when we wanted to be back to the trailhead.
Yeah, because I bet it makes a huge difference on, which really exposed parts are going to be awful in the heat of the day, or like, if you need water at certain aspects, or if water's only flowing at certain times. I mean, I can't even imagine the spreadsheets on spreadsheets it would take to like perfectly nail the timing. And I'm sure you don't perfectly ever nail the timing, right?
Exactly. And that was the reality. It was a trade-off, right? It was a trade-off of, if we leave at this time, then this is probably going to happen. If we go here, then this is going to happen. So it's almost the idea of like pick your poison.
Yeah.
Decide which risk or which kind of inconvenience or challenge that you think are going to be able to mitigate and address on the fly the easiest and address that. And then what are those challenges that maybe are a little bigger that we maybe want to mitigate by leaving at a certain time. Mm-hmm. So it was we were supposed to be resting, but I'm not going to lie. There was a lot of, there was some anxiety trying to decide when we were going to leave and looking over. I can't tell you how many times we pulled out the map of Kilimanjaro and we would just sit there and like, look at it and be like, well, if we leave this time, we come back here. And eventually we just had to decide on the time that we were going to leave. And we're going to stick with this. And we think this is our best reasonable guess. And we made that decision not very far in advance. It was almost like a game time, like a day of decision. We're like, okay, we're going to leave at 9:00 at night. And that's what we're going to have to do.
When you're like about to press start on your watch, right? Because you have to
Yes.
have it to the second. How did that feel different than towing the line at, say, the Superior 100?
Oh God. I don't think I've ever been that scared at the start of the Superior 100, but I felt, let me preface that, I don't think feeling scared or feeling fear is a bad thing.
Mhm.
I think that's a good thing. And I was like, we were standing there and we was like, all right, we just got to fucking go. Like, let's just go. And you start out and you have a lot of nerves and you have a lot of adrenaline and you have a lot of stress, and then it goes away and we're just able to focus in and be like, okay, we're just gonna go and get this done. It was also a little bit of relief because we had been waiting to do this for so long. It had reached that point where, okay, like, it's time to go. I don't want to push this off any farther. I am scared, but I just want to go. So it was both like, oh shit, I'm doing this. And then also, finally, we're starting and this is going to happen.
Mhm. What were there any moments on the ascent where you were like, ooh, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I don't know if this is going to go well.
Mm-hmm. So a couple things about that. We might have talked about this when I talked with Brian, because Brian was there with me. We had said, quitting is not an option. It's not, unless we reach the point where one of us is incapacitated to the point where we need to have a heli rescue come in. An example of that would be if we, acute AMS, like, hay pace, something that was physically hurting us to the point where we could die or irreparably hurt ourselves, then we would stop. But outside of that, being an ultra runner, you get used to dealing with discomfort. Discomfort's not a reason to stop. Feeling sick or having diarrhea, which I did, is not a reason to stop. Like, you keep going. Those are not reasons to throw in the towel. And when something has this much meaning to you and you've been working towards it for 5+ years, you set those guardrails and you set that determination that you're not going to stop. And you take that out of the equation. And then it makes everything else much easier. And it also, when those moments of doubt come up, because it was very challenging, like, it was probably the hardest thing I've done in my athletic career to date. Having that knowledge and kind of setting those guardrails ahead of time means that when that gets really hard, maybe we're like, oh man, this really effing sucks right now, or I just want to go home and lay in my comfortable bed. You're able to take those and mentally just move them and be like, okay, that thought came up. I'm going to let that go, release that back out into the wild and keep going, because I already know that none of those things are going to impact this immediate moment and me moving forward. There were some times that were very, very challenging. I think I've talked about this multiple times. The climb from School Hut up the scree slope to Stella's Point to Gilman's Point was soul crushing. And the good thing about that is it was a beautiful day. We ended up starting our ascent in the middle of the day and ended up reaching the peak around 3:30. So we were able to climb up and ascend in the sun and in the middle of the day, which was gorgeous. It was warmer than normal, but that's climbing up a scree field, as I'm sure anyone in mountaineering has done, is not fun. And it felt like we would take one step forward and slide back two. And that's probably the hardest I've worked trying to ascend. It's a 5K from the base, from School Hut to the summit. That's probably the slowest 5K in my life and the hardest I've had to work for a 5K.
Wow.
So,
were there any pieces of the ascent that went smoother than you expected?
I mean, honestly, this might jinx my next adventure. The entire FKT went surprisingly well. We were able to address challenges that we had. We were able to work around some bumps that we had. And we had been worried about the ascent because that's really the crux of the route, right? It's not the end. It's the middle. That you hit the ascent in the middle of this 62 miles, which is challenging because you've had, 20 some miles and then you start this climb. So your body's exhausted, your brain's exhausted. But not both having that recon and then the way that we'd set up our gear and our food drops, the ascent was probably one of the easier parts of the whole FKT because we'd planned so well and we had been anticipating that if we were going to have challenges, they were going to happen then. And it went surprisingly well. So we passed Gilman's Point, got to Stella's Point, and our guides had actually radioed ahead and coordinated with another group that was climbing the same day. So they had hot noodles waiting for us at Stella's Point, which is like at, I think, 18,700 feet. I could be wrong, so you might have to fact check me on that, but it's kind of like your last stop right before you hit the summit. So, at 18,000 some feet, your body, your brain, everything's exhausted. You need food and calories. We were able to stop and, down a bowl of noodle soup, which gave us the warmth and the energy we needed to push to the summit and then start our descent. And that was magical. Like, how many times are you going to be in the middle of an FKT and have hot noodles at like 18,000 plus feet? So
magic. I mean, you were doing like a round trip or like a lollipop loop. Do you have to like rush your summit then? You're just like, okay, great, get the picture and then like keep moving.
Yep.
That's so hard.
It's hard because the funny thing about being at that level of altitude is you can't move fast. We thought we were moving fast. We probably looked like we were like swimming through molasses. But yeah, we had to take a couple pictures and then we were like, all right, we got to go. And then just head back down. We had left our packs at Stella's Point, so we could easily kind of do the summit or the crux, pick up our packs. And then we just basically started skiing down the scree in the dirt field for the descent.
What were your immediate emotions when you got back down to base camp and were able to say that you finished?
Oh man, it was, so we made the summit and we ascended, but then we still had 24 miles left to go. So the summit was not the end. So we started descending down the scree field and we still had 24 miles left to go. And by the time we got back to the Lemosho trailhead, I think it was 9 or 10 in the morning. And we were exhausted. We'd kind of stopped talking to each other and just kind of giving thumbs up and smiles. And like, I was so tired when I reached the finish line. It was both, I felt like my brain was trying to catch up with everything because during the FKT, it was 36 hours and 5 minutes. I had been so focused on, just keep going. Like, you're doing this, like, be locked in. And when we finished, it was both almost surprising, like, oh shit, we're done. And then it was like, what the fuck just happened? Like, we did this. Not that I had ever doubted it. I hadn't thought that much about finishing and what it would feel like. I had been so focused on getting through this and knowing I was going to do it. I didn't really know how to react when we reached the Lemosho trailhead. There was nobody there. It was just, Brian and I finishing. And I was so tired. My brain was just like, how do I process this? Like, my body feels this way. My brain is tired that I did this and I'm so proud of myself. But it was probably the biggest like storm and soup and tangle of emotions I've had. Very positive, but just trying to catch up with everything and maybe piece out those emotions and sort them. But it was also very validating to be at the end and be like, yeah, we did this. Yeah, like this happened.
And it's just such a part of your like lifelong story of like being a kid and being so enamored by a certain mountain, then to have a piece of you be a piece of that mountain's history. That's just so special. What do you think like little child Colleen would be thinking about you right now?
I think she'd be really proud. I think she would be, it would validate the feelings that she had and remind her that it's okay to want to live that life of adventure, and it's okay to not be like everyone else, and it's okay to have that inner driver, that inner pull, and not to doubt yourself or try to make yourself into something you're not. I think I wish I would have had me when I was younger, this older version of me. So
Yeah. I think that's why a lot of us do these things is we get,
yes,
it's like really like I get emotional thinking about that. But
yes,
I think a lot
yes.
of our trailblazers at the Cairn Project are
Mhm.
doing this not just for them now and not just for the impact that they'll have on other people, but also for like a younger version of themselves.
Exactly. And I think for me, what was so powerful at the end was there might not be a lot of chances in life where you have that ability to honor and affirm that younger version of yourself in such a powerful way, and honor and affirm something that's called to you for so long. You might not always get that chance, right? Or maybe things don't come together in that way we're able to do that. But it felt really good to honor that young girl, to honor that dream that popped up 5+ years ago, 10 years ago, whatever, to honor that pull that I had, and to validate that how I've approached life, or that drive towards adventure, and that the way that I live my life differently in all aspects is okay. And there is meaning and there's purpose behind it. And you can do something amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really powerful too. Now, obviously, all those thoughts were not happening right at that finish line. That came after. But looking back, I think that's a really powerful thing is, yeah, not giving up, seeing this through, because it was such a long, big project, and finally completing it was pretty amazing.
Yeah. And when we spoke the last time you were on the show, we had a big theme of post-adventure blues. How's that going for you? Did you
Oh,
encounter
God.
post-adventure blues this time?
Yes, I did. I'm so glad you asked. And I know we've talked about this, at our side conversations too. There are a couple things about this, and this could lead into whole other tangents. But when you're pushing at altitude, it can really impact your body, obviously, both from it's hard to eat when you're pushing at altitude, and it can mess with your internal systems. So when we finished, I did not feel good. Now, I did my best with nutrition, and that's probably a whole nother podcast for another time. I'd done really well with nutrition. We had a great plan, but the nature of these things are, I'm sure when you finish 100-mile, 50-mile, you kind of feel like crap. I couldn't eat anything for like 2 days after finishing because my body was I had intense nausea and I didn't feel good. And then I got a head cold, and then we had to fly back to the States on a plane, which is kind of like a large germ tube.
Ugh.
So for about a week after this FKT and getting home, I felt like absolute crap. That impacted my ability to both recover from a physical standpoint and a mental standpoint, because I couldn't get in the food that I needed to be able to make myself physically feel better, which also impacted how I felt mentally. Because on the one hand, I was so happy and so proud of this. I didn't have the energy. I had like this head cold that felt like the worst kind of allergies you can ever imagine. And my body was just going through this post-adventure, like, you're not feeling good, you're nauseous, you need to get calories into you. So that contributed, because your brain and your body and your emotions are all connected, that contributed to a fairly significant bout of post-adventure blues to a depth that I have not experienced in a while. That has been very challenging because, on the one hand, I am so proud of this. I am so proud of what happened. I'm so proud of getting this done. I'm so proud of having the support of my partner. I'm so proud of the money that I was able to raise. But I think this is a great story. Those feelings were very much delayed by feeling like absolute crap for about 3 weeks after this FKT. So that's been happening like that. Obviously we're a couple months beyond that now, but the immediate aftermath of that FKT was very competing emotions of being proud, but then like mentally and physically not having the energy to really celebrate that or let that sink in.
Totally.
One of the things that I've noticed about this that's been different from post 100-mile is that there's been more ups and downs. And that's been good for me. And I've talked about this previously, to try to approach that without judgment and give myself that grace to say, this was a big thing. It's okay to have these different waves of that. It's okay. Like, focus on feeling better, Colleen. Focus on giving yourself white space. Focus on giving yourself the mental and physical rest that you need. And it's okay to maybe feel down one day and then feel like so stoked the next day. So it's been a good, it's been challenging, and it's been more up and downs than I've had previously. But it's also been a good chance for me to revisit and remind myself of the things that I've talked to you about and other people about, is accepting that with grace and writing it out. And at the end of the day, the net result of this project was larger and bigger than me. And so that's something that I've been going back to, especially in those days when I'm feeling a little down. It's like, well, you feel down. That doesn't change the reality that this project had a larger impact. Yeah. And there's still positivity and a net ripple effect that is good.
Yeah. So again, you did this partially as a fundraiser for the Karen Project so that other girls and women can get assistance in going out and doing their own big things. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people listening being like, well, yeah, it's like an FKT on Kilimanjaro. Of course it can be a fundraiser. It's massive. It's newsworthy. It's record setting. What is your perspective on that? Like, is a smaller adventure just as worthy? And what, is... in the theme of self-censorship that we were talking about, like how do we know that our adventure, no matter the size, is something worth sharing the story of or turning into something bigger?
That's a good question. So a couple ways to answer that. One, I've been absolutely humbled and floored by the messages I've gotten from people that have told me that my stories resonated with them, that it's encouraged them to try something new. I had a couple friends reach out to me from years ago when I was really deep into climbing, said that they're now going to go try to do Kilimanjaro, or probably will, but they're going to go climb Kilimanjaro. I've had friends reach out to me and say that they have been passing along my blogs and the fundraising project to their daughters because they've seen that their daughters may be going through a challenging time and needs that encouragement to be able to try that challenging thing. I've had a couple of people reach out to me and say that they had never realized that there were barriers to women getting in the outdoors before, and they didn't even know it was a thing. And that has been really powerful to me because it showed me that there's validity to sharing your story, as you said, but that a lot of the people that were resonating with it, they didn't even want to go do necessarily a big FKT or do like something bonkers crazy. For them, they were feeling that encouragement to reach out to their daughter. They were feeling that encouragement that they were going to try that challenging thing or try that hard thing in their life. That they felt inspired to kind of look at their life and say, what do I really want? Do I want to do this big thing? What changes can I make? And that to me is really powerful because if we take it back to your question of, does somebody have to do something big? No. I think if you or me or anybody can take that small step to do something that pushes them outside of their comfort zone, or if they have a dream, whatever that is, follow that and see where that goes. That doesn't have to be anything big. It can be something small, but maybe it's big to you. There's validity in that. There's like adventure and there's beauty and there's grace in that. It doesn't have to be a big FKT. It can if you want it to be. But I think understanding that if you can listen to that intuition and gut that you have, if you can be self-aware about those things that are holding you back and see where there are places where you can maybe try something new or step outside your comfort zone, go for that.
Yeah. It's one of my broken record messages that I'm always giving trailblazers or anyone involved with the Karen Project is a story isn't just what happened. A story is how what happened changed you. And in order for a story to resonate, it's usually going to be pretty relatable. And so if you can find those pieces of what about this adventure changed you or what is relatable, what are the emotions here, then it doesn't matter whether you're running a mile or running 100 miles, as long as you're finding those relatable bits. So like you were saying with your story, it's about following this passion that has followed you for most of your life. It's about choosing a goal that is scary to you and that you're not sure if you can do. It's about putting in those long-term logistics and planning and finding the right team and like accounting for all the things that could go wrong or could go right. And all of those pieces can be applied to any adventure. You don't have to be putting on this record-setting attempt in order to really relate with people and get them talking about these conversations like the barriers to women and girls in the outdoors and gender equity in other places, not in the outdoors, right? Like these are all just conversation starters, and you can do that with an adventure of any size and any type.
And I think, too, the other aspect to that is I think it's powerful as a human to be accountable to yourself. And even if it's not this big adventure, there's growth that can happen when you have that goal or you have that thing that scares you or that thing that's going to push you outside of your comfort zone. Doing that once kind of builds that positive feedback loop, right? Like you take that small step. Maybe it's a 5K. Maybe it's signing up for Toastmasters because public speaking is scary. Maybe it's joining a meetup group in a hobby that you're not sure about, but you're interested in. Any of those things are awesome and valid if it's helping you stay accountable to yourself and moving you towards you showing up as your best version of yourself. It doesn't have to be a big adventure. It can be something small, but even the act of doing that, to your point, strengthens that muscle and gives you that platform or that knowledge that you can then bring someone along with you. The other thing I was going to say about the fundraising that I think was really smart, or that I appreciated that I did, is I did a lot of updates with the donors, but then also post FKT, I tried to post 2 or 3 updates, let the donors know about the blogs, the interviews, let them know I finished. I also sent everybody on the donation list a tracker so they could track us when we started the FKT. So as much as possible, I tried to bring people along for the story because, again, if we think about the net goal of this adventure is, to raise money and also raise awareness. I thought by having everybody along for the story, then this project would stick with the donors longer and perhaps firm up in their mind the message of this, which was to reach out to their daughters, their sisters, their mothers, to encourage women to use their voice, to step outside their comfort zone. So by bringing people along for that story and kind of closing it up with like the results and some of the resounding blogs, I was really hoping that everything would stick with people longer and hopefully have encouraged them to continue to take those actions.
And also, I mean, the adventure itself, right? Like the actual climb is ephemeral, that you were out there for a couple of weeks, but the blog posts that you put up are forever, and they're full of actually like really helpful. If you're going to Kilimanjaro and you're not even trying to, run it or set an FKT, what you shared is really, really helpful. And how cool is that if a woman is Googling, tips for climbing Kilimanjaro, you might pop up and then she's like, wait, a woman wrote this. How rad. So I just think it's great that you can have a lasting effect. Thinking back to our previous episode, which was more focused on running and the superior 100-mile race, when thinking back to that episode, it feels like you shared kind of chapters of your running life and chapters of training for that one particular race. So I thought of this kind of creative question I would love to hear your answer for. But imagine that you are 120 years old. You've lived a long, long life, and you're looking back at your life as a book full of chapters. What would this Kili adventure chapter be called? What's the title of it?
Oh, man. I really like that question. I probably have 2 answers.
We can have a subtitle for the chapter.
Yeah. One might not be what we want to, might be sweary and a little bit awkward. When anybody has asked me what Kilimanjaro was like, my answer has been, oh my gosh, it was so fucking rad. And that would probably be the title or the subtitle. I think maybe the main title would be something around that I'm really proud of following my heart, or I'm really proud of following my gut. And subtitle, it was really fucking rad.
I love it. Well, I'll be there to read your memoir whenever it comes out in 100 years.
I love that question because I think those are kind of the 2 sides of the same coin, or sort of my personality is both kind of bold and I'm going to be sweary, but then also I think it's balanced out by really understanding that there was advocacy and following your heart and your gut and honoring that younger girl that really wanted to live that wild life. So I think those 2 things are intertwined.
You can have both.
Yes.
Whatever chapter of your life's book that you're writing right now, I hope Colleen's story and attitude are reminders that you can blend your big, bold, badass energy with your desire for advocacy and community impact. Colleen is one of a handful of trailblazers who turned a 2025 personal adventure into something much greater than herself. Our volunteer trailblazers turn their adventures into grassroots fundraisers that fund wilderness scholarships for other women. We call this a Get Out, Give Back campaign. And I'm here to help you share your stories the entire way along your trailblazer journey. Getting to work with women like Colleen is a dream, and I know how much of a difference it makes for our media and for inclusion in outdoor adventure. I know that her story today isn't really the end of the story, but a turn to the next chapter. So if your next chapter might include getting out to give back, reach out and see if the Trailblazer program with the Cairn Project should be a part of it. See Her Outside is brought to you by the Alliance for Gender Equity in Outdoor Adventure, hosted by me, Angie Lake, and edited by Allison Castingway. Make sure you hit that subscribe or follow button now so that you don't miss any future episodes. We'd love for you to stay in touch, send us your feedback so that we can team up in our mission to close the gender gap and work towards a more inclusive outdoors. Until next time, go get outside.